cannot wait to hear what Riv and the guys at the analyst desk have to say about breaking down Gambit's incredibly clutch win.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And there is quite a bit to talk about here just from the start. Picks and bans, seeing Imp on Varus, the gold sways throughout the game. And we are going to start in picks and bans. You know, Jat, what were we looking at and a little bit more?
So this thing that happened with Ozone in the World Championship is I felt like they had a two-pronged attack initially going in. It was Dade and Imp. Dade played off the entire World Championship, and he was on Twisted Fate. And even though in the context of their overall composition, Varus made sense, in the context of the team, it does not, because he can't make the plays that he's accustomed to making when they win. And I just didn't like their overall composition because of that fact.
Well, of course, and I mean, who's been coming up big in these wins for Ozone when they have won?
Looper a lot of the time.
It's Looper, it's Dandy, and it's Imp. And Imp has had just immensely good teamfight presence on Vayne over their last couple of games. But they decide to put him onto Varus here, which is a champion he is very comfortable with, but without another kind of big carry right here. And they had to put Looper on ANALYST, that meant, to get some more damage output, but then that left them without much of a tank. And against Kassadin, Kog'Maw, that's going to cause you huge problems in the late game, which is pretty much exactly what we saw.
Varus is also incredibly weak against Assassins, and Gambit ran 3 Assassins, Aatrox, Eve, and Kassadin, especially Kassadin. It's just really awful because Kassadin, as you can see this game, he built Merc Treads, he was unaffected by Varus' ulti, and he can just dance around the fight while Varus is a very immobile AD carry. Imp had to really carry this game because Dade didn't play the best game of his life, and obviously he couldn't do anything, just outmatched.
Peppo, thoughts about it?
I just think the Varus pick could have worked, but only up to a certain point in minutes in the game. And if you make one mistake against the Kassadin, as you saw, like Froggen tweeted that earlier as well, you can't get there. It's really hard. Like Kassadin snowballs so hard. That's why so many people in mid lane in Europe are so scared of it. That's why that's actually one of the reasons why the mid lane metagame in Europe evolved to having last pick mid lane. That's why some people actually consider picking purple over blue. First pick isn't as important because it basically removes Kassadin as a ban, and Kassadin is a counter pick to a lot of the favorable mid lanes.
And, you know, Monty, to direct this at you, how do we feel about Ozone coming in here using Looper, you know, the entire time with the option to be in different positions?
I mean, I'm just kind of incredulous after their repeated performance. Ohm is here. Ohm is in this building right now, and they chose repeatedly not to use him, even though they did look quite weak. They were exposed very early on in this tournament, and it's somewhat baffling to me. I have no idea the reasoning behind it, but...
Although we
gotta wonder.
We still have to say that Looper played really good games.
He did.
Although he played a lot of champions that he overlapped with Home on his champions pool. Maybe in particular for this game, knowing that Gambit had a really bad track record against Zac, 0-8 now I believe the last few games.
Right.
Maybe they should have put in Home and just let him play Zac, because as far as I know, he's a really, really strong Zac player.
He is, and in fact, his synergy with Dandy earned them a lot of first bloods in Korea in that lane, even against like very strong top laners like Flame from CJ Blaze. So it is kind of a mystery. And I mean, what was also mysterious about this game a little bit too, we were looking at that bottom tower fight when Ozone had a lead of a few K, and coming into that too at the second tier. That's going back to the Kassadin snowball as well. That's really what started getting Alex its rocking, right? And they kind of just sat there, took a lot of damage, didn't trade a lot back in return. Dade, after most of his team was dead, poured it into that lane, allowing Darien to split push. So they gave up 3 or 4 kills, tier 2 top turret, and a dragon. All at once.
4,500 swinging gold there.
Yeah, and not only was Dade not there, and I feel like this may be beating a dead horse, but you really have to point out that Dade was nearly 100 CS down as a TF, which is not normal. Against a Kassadin, you should be greatly out-CSing him. He ended the game with around 380 AP at 46 minutes, or 44 minutes, I should say.
Partly due to a misclick on the
yeah, that we talked about
Yeah.
tilting earlier, but nerves also fall into that, buying items that you don't need.
That was definitely a big nerve thing. When he bought a Maji's Soul Stealer, got 0 stacks out of it, based, and then sold it and to buy an Hourglass, that was like a huge waste of several hundred gold. That really could have changed the game.
I really think that overall here, throughout the entire World Championship, Ozone just never had synergy. Not once. Coming in, maybe it was because Ohm wasn't reliable for them. Maybe it's because they had to change their roster. Maybe it's because they hadn't traveled before. But just looking back at this now, the fact that 2 European teams are moving on from this group, not a single one of us predicted that. And I don't think many people online did, as far as maybe like a crazy European fanboy would have. But it's
crazy
ridiculous.
European fanboy? Educated European fanboy. I just still want to go back on that tower where everything went wrong and Cassian started snowballing. Actually, I don't want to put the blame on Dada there. It's just his team was pushing without him. We clearly saw he based and he was walking towards the race, and then he did a maximum range teleport to the lane, which basically ended up being useless. They tried to hide in the brush. They tried to pull a Fnatic on Gambit and got caught out, took another two people down and got the tower there. So that was like a multitude of misplays. The first one pushing without TF, which is horrible. This early siege will only work if everybody's there and they can just push. Because Darian, he was stuck in the top lane. He had no possibility of coming close to helping, and you just gotta. They could have sieged really easily with their composition, with the lead they had, but they just gave Cassidy a chance to jump in. And if you're not with enough people, you will not punish Cassidy jumping in.
So as teams see, what happens and how the game has been absolutely swaying so much at Baron, I think within the last few games, people are taking it way more into consideration. Do you guys think it's going to change the games as we move on to the groups?
I think a lot of that has to do with the shot calling that's going on. When you start an objective like Baron or Dragon, immediately the shot caller needs to say, we're turning or we're actually finishing it, which would result in a 50-50 smite war, which is exactly what you saw. If the call was to turn, which is the correct call because you don't want to get in a 50-50 smite war when you're that far ahead. There's almost no way you can lose the game when you're that far ahead, except as you see at these Baron 50-50s. And you can completely avoid this. You can A, not do Baron, or B, just bait it so that you can start a team fight. And you just see the same mistake happen, I guess, twice in a row. We
have to give props to Dandy, though. That was a flash, max range smite steal at the right given time. He was absolutely amazing. I think Money even had a nickname for him.
Oh, yeah. Doe and I call Dandy the King of Thieves because this is not uncommon for him to do. He's had numerous clutch steals.
Yeah, in fact, even to get them into the second seed, the third-place game in Champion Summer, he had a smite steal in Game 5 against CJ Ench's Frost. It's an incredibly clutch move, and it's unfortunate. I mean, here at the World Championships, not every team gets to move on, but I mean, with all the mistakes Ozone made throughout, regardless of how well Dandy played, they did not really deserve to move on.
No, they definitely did not deserve to move on, and I said earlier, I'm happy Gambit's moving on because I find Gambit the more reliable team to watch right now, and Ozone came here, they look unprepared, they decided to use substitute players for good or bad, but they don't deserve to move on to the quarterfinals.
I really hope a lot of teams, including Gambit, will now start using Baron more as a tool to bait enemy players instead of actually going for that Baron. Hey, can we finish it? We don't know. Oh, well, let's try it anyways. Worst case, you back out because that just doesn't work. A lot of the times you start a Baron thinking, yeah, if they know, or if they realize we can back out, but by then it's so late that people are like, yeah, why not try and finish it? But then you're essentially giving the enemies a 50% chance to steal. And a lot of junglers actually tell me that it's easier to steal a Baron because you have no pressure. The Baron's technically in your head, the Baron's lost, and you can only win it. As opposed to the underjungler, he can only lose that Baron. Because if you get your Baron stolen from you, you're the mocking spot. If you're the steal, you're the hero. It's a little weight difference on it.
All right, so we have Fnatic and Gambit moving on. How do you feel that these guys are going to weigh in coming into, Najin Sword, Royal, Cloud9, and Gamma as well with these matchups?
Well, to be honest, I think Gambit has been looking a little shaky. I mean, yeah, they did pull out the win against Ozone, but they didn't have a spectacular score coming into the group, or coming out of the group, I should say.
Right.
And I feel like they're going to have a hard time unless potentially if they draw Gamma Bears, who people kind of immediately discount because, they're not very well known. Their top 4 finish may be in jeopardy. They're consistent top 4 finishes at every lane.
I think especially with Gambit, more so than any other team, they turn it on at the very last minute.
Yeah.
They wait until they're down a game. Like, if they move on, it'll be 3 games, they'll have a 7,000 gold disadvantage, and then they'll come back and win. That seems to be the way it works.
Still really late. Waiting for that tower push for the enemy team to turn it out was pretty late. I would have liked them to turn it out a little earlier.
I feel like their manager, Constantine, would also like them to go a little sooner. But, oh man, it's exciting to watch at least.
I'm actually interested to see how Royal is going to show up. I'm not even sure. Have they traveled before to international events? As far as I know, they haven't. So they're gonna come in cold. They haven't played any games here. They scrimmed and warmed up and all. But these teams coming out of group stages, they do have the edge because they warmed up. They're used to the crowd. They're used to the setting. They've played on these PCs, for example. They know how hard this desk is. It's all these little things that, as a pro player, affects you a lot more than you would think.
I'm not sure for the entire Royal team, but I know Tabe was in WCG 2011 in Korea, so he's actually traveled long ago, and then he actually retired for a time, and now he's back in competitive. But he's definitely seasoned in that regard. Hopefully, he could transfer some of that knowledge to the rest of his team.
Whites may have been on that team as well. Both Tabe and Whites have been around for a long time, so...
All right, gentlemen. Well, believe it or not, we have more games to go. And with that, this means 21 of the Group B games are now in our match history. So let's take a look at the final standings. In first place, it's Europe's Fnatic with a 7-1 record, while Gambit takes second thanks to their tie-breaking win.
Yeah, rounding out the final Group B standings are Korea's Ozone in third, North America's Vulcan, and then Philippines' Mineski.
All right, well, Group B's officially finished here at Worlds. We still have got 5 more games to predict as we go on in the competition between the analysts here. That is the word. Let's take a look at the standings heading into the second half of the day for you guys. Sitting at the top of the pack are the viewers with an impressive 30-5 record. Pat yourself on the back. In second place, it's a tie between the casters and Monte Cristo at 28-7 with Double Lift 3 games back and Crepo 4 games out of first with only 5 more matches.